I would like to call up Mr. Eric Jan to talk about sports analytics.
Thank you. Okay, well, we didn't go over this to start. It's a close one. Hello, my name is Eric Jan, and thank you for attending my Masterworks presentation about sports analytics. But before I start, does anyone know what sports analytics is? Have you ever seen the movie or read the book Moneyball? Brad Pitt's in the movie? Yeah, well, that's basically it. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. The movie is about the 2002 Oakland A's, which is a baseball team in Major League Baseball, or MLB for short. The general manager, Billy Beane, used sports analytics to construct a team of low-salary players. Everyone thought that Billy Beane had lost his mind, but they were all proven wrong when the A's went on an amazing 20-game winning streak that season, won their division, and went to the American League Division Series, which is like the quarterfinals. In 2002, the Oakland A's were a low-salary team who ranked third lowest in payroll with only $1 million more than the Montreal Expos, who are now called the Washington Nationals, and $5 more than the Tampa Bay Rays. Interestingly, the film Moneyball had a $46 million budget, $5 more than the 2002 Oakland A's payroll. But back to analytics. Sports analytics is a broad subject that uses math by means of analyzing statistics. It helps teams to gain an edge on an opponent because it tells coaches what the opponent's tendencies are and uses probability to exploit them. It helps general managers by telling them how talented a player is through his stats. The stats show the talent that you can't always catch with the naked eye. Basically, analytics is the study of statistics to find a meaning. So how did I get interested in sports analytics? Ever since I could remember, I've been in love with sport. Whether I was watching the first period of the Vancouver Canucks hockey game before bed, sitting on the sofa watching NFL footballs on Sunday with my dad, playing soccer on Saturday, or standing on the baseball field for 2 hours on Sunday not having a clue what I was supposed to do, or arguing with friends about which player or team was better, I loved it all. By grade 5, my love of sports grew even more. By then, I was old enough to stay up and watch 2 periods of the hockey game before bed, which was a big deal at the time. My love for sports grew into an interest in sports management. When I think back to grade 5, I remember 2 things: trading hockey cards with my friends at lunch, and wanting to be the general manager of the Vancouver Canucks. And if I was, they'd probably won a Stanley Cup by now. I pursued my passion for the role of the general manager and became the new GM of the Vancouver Canucks in the NHL video game called NHL 14, and I was really good. About 2 years later, when I was in grade 7, I stayed home, sick, if you know what I mean, and watched the film Moneyball for the first time. Moneyball inspired me and opened a new world to me, a world of math and sports. I'd always been interested in math and sports as separate topics, so sports analytics was a perfect topic to explore in my Masterworks because it combines these 2 things. In this presentation, I'll be looking at the history of sports analytics, how it is currently being used in different sports and by different teams, and the future of sports analytics. The history of sports analytics is something that has been a part of sports for a while, but didn't gain popularity until 2003 when the book Moneyball was released. In 1845, the first form of analytics was used in sports, in baseball. The first box score, a scorekeeping method, appeared in the New York Morning newspaper. It included only runs and outs by each player. As you can see here, this is a box score from a New York high school and then a Tokyo high school. This is all the players on the roster. This is their position. This is how many runs they scored, so how many times they crossed home plate, and this is how many times they got out. It is all totaled down here, and then how many runs each scored per inning, per team, is also totaled down here. Henry Chadwick, often called the father of baseball, was a cricket reporter for the New York Times in 1856 when he watched his first game of baseball. He instantly fell in love with the sport and started to write regular columns on baseball, and in 1859 created his first modern box score inspired by a cricket scorecard. It documented statistics like runs, hits, putouts, assists, and errors. Chadwick also recorded the pitcher's strikeouts. Chadwick is best known for creating the batting average, or how many times he hit the ball out of every at-bat. Over the next 15 years, he developed a modern box score. The earliest sports analytics formulas were used inspired by the cricket scorecard. These were included in sports columns so fans could compare statistics such as runs, hits, putouts, assists, and errors, and batting average. For the first time, a fan could compare the statistics of one player to another and form their own opinions without having to travel to the ballpark. Analytics in the NFL compared to baseball is relatively new. The idea of analytics in the NFL first started with the Dallas Cowboys in the 1960s. The Dallas Cowboys hired an immigrant named A. Salam Qureshi, a computer statistician and programmer who knew absolutely nothing about football. Qureshi worked for IBM when the Cowboys hired him. He built a computer program that ranked college football and some basketball players to see if they would make a good football player. It was based on characteristics that scouts said made a good football player. Nothing had ever been done like this before, and because of this, the Cowboys went to 5 straight Super Bowls and had 20 winning seasons, meaning that they won more games than they lost in each season. This amazing run is what made the Dallas Cowboys so popular. Although hockey is new to the analytics scene, it has made a big impact on the way hockey clubs play today. In the NHL during the mid-60s, Scotty Bowman introduced the idea of plus-minus figures, and the official league statistics expanded to cover shots on goal, blocked and missed shots, hits, face-off percentages, and time on ice. It wasn't until 2014 that the NHL started to implement a more detailed analytics approach. I will now talk about how sports analytics are used today in the sports of baseball, football, and hockey. Baseball has the most obvious forms of analytics to the average viewer. A batter comes up to hit, and up on the television and at the field comes some simple statistics like his batting average, on-base percentage, which you actually can't see there, and many other statistics. When a commentator talks about a player, they will often refer to analytics without you knowing. There are many forms of analytics in baseball, so I broke them down into 3 sections: batting, fielding, and pitching. Batting stats are one of the most common used forms of analytics. They can be very broad or very specific. One of the most common stats is batting average. Batting average is the average of base hits per plate appearances. So the number of times a player hits the ball out of every opportunity. If the player gets walked or hit by pitch, then it does not count as a plate appearance. A 300 batting average is someone who hits the ball 3 out of 10 at-bats and is considered a good batting average in the MLB. In the 2017 regular season, Jose Altuve led the league with a 346 batting average. Imagine that if I got over 30% on my exams, I'd be making over $20 million a year. Slugging percentage is the number of bases divided by amount of plate appearances, which again does not include walks. A single when a batter gets to first base is worth 1 base. A double when a batter gets to second base on a hit is worth 2 bases. A triple is worth 3 bases, and a home run is worth 4 bases. A good slugging percentage is around .550. Last year, Giancarlo Stanton had an impressive .631 slugging percentage, which not surprisingly led the league. This is mostly because of the amount of home runs that he hit. Wins above replacement, or WAR for short, is one of my personal favorite stats, and yes, I am a geek. The WAR calculates how much value a player brings to their team. It calculates how many more wins the team would have compared to if they played the average minor leaguer instead, which is their replacement. You can see the caliber of player and what their WAR normally is. In 2017, Jose Altuve helped the Houston Astros win 8.3 more games and was the MVP that season. A player with the worst WAR in 2017 was Albert Pujols of the LA Angels, who lost them 1.8 games that season. Fielding stats are some of the most hidden stats in baseball, but can influence the outcome of a baseball game. Some of them can make you shake your head and wonder, why would they do something like that? There's a science behind the madness. Shifting is a fielding strat used by most MLB teams. It is where fielders play out of their usual positions. Normally, all infielders shift to one side of the field. They do this because the statistics say the hitter normally hits the ball to the one side of the field. So let's say that Bob is up to bat, and he hits the ball to the right side of the infield 75% of the time, straight up the middle 20% of the time, and to the left side the remaining 5%. Wouldn't it make sense to put all your infielders on the right half of the field because you know that Bob will hit the ball there 95% of the time? You might think that this strategy would be a no-brainer, but it wasn't popularized until 2012. In 2013, the Houston Astros shifted 496 times all season, but in 2014, they shifted 1,314 times. They're also the reigning World Series champions. So this graphic shows the most stereotypical shift. So the third baseman, who normally plays over here closer to third, has moved up almost to where the shortstop would normally play, and then the shortstop is just in behind second base, pushing the second baseman out into shallow right field. So they're obviously playing that this batter will hit the ball to this side of the infield. You can see this graphic shows the amount of shifts from 2011 to 2016. In 2011, there's only 2,350 shifts all season by every MLB team totaled. And then in 2016, that number goes up to 28,000. In this image, all 4 infielders are on the right side of the infield. And the bases are loaded in the bottom of 12th, which means it's like in overtime. Now you're probably thinking, why don't they just hit the ball to the other side? Well, it's hard because the ball's coming at you so fast, they don't have time to think about where you want to hit the ball. Pitching analytics is one of the most important analytics in baseball. If you have a bad pitcher, you normally lose the game and make your other pitchers work. Earned run average is the amount of earned runs given up per 9 innings, the traditional length of a baseball game. It is determined by the number of runs allowed per inning and multiplied by 9 innings. In 2017, Corey Kluber had a 2.25 earned run average, which led the league. Analytics is something that is relatively new to hockey, but is expanding in popularity among fans and in the head office of NHL teams. Most teams don't talk a lot about their analytics department because it's every day that they're finding more ways to evaluate players and make their team better, which can become a competitive advantage. That said, not all formats of hockey analytics are hidden, and I will examine both some simple forms and some more advanced forms. Corsi plus minus is the amount of shot attempts for your team while a certain player is on the ice compared to the number of shot attempts for the other team. Corsi for is the amount of shot attempts that your team has while a certain player is on the ice, and Corsi against is the amount of shot attempts that the opposing team has on you while a certain player is on the ice. This graph shows the correlation between the amount of points the team had with the Corsi percentages. The team with the higher Corsi percentages normally ended up with more points compared to the teams with lower Corsi percentage. A more complicated stat in the NHL is the ELO rating system. It is a method for comparing the relative skill level of competitors. It was invented by Arpid Elo, a physics professor, to rate chess players. So for example, a 60-second shift is played between a player on line A and a team on line B. Based on the player ratings, let's say that A line is expected to score an average of 0.05 more goals than the B line every 60 seconds. If neither team scores, then the players on the B line would receive a slight increase in their rating because they beat the expectation. If players on the A line would receive a slight decrease for the same reason. This graph shows the Canucks ELO compared to the rest of the NHL. As you can tell, we peaked in 2011 when we made the Stanley Cup final, and it's been all downhill since. Another sport where analytics is being used more and more today is football. In the NFL, offensive pass breakdown breaks down which of the 6 zones on the field is targeted the most with a pass. This stat is used to show teams where they are likely to throw the ball. For example, the defensive coordinator on the opposing team might tell his players that they like to throw short and to the outside. This would help them defend accordingly. This table is an add-on to the graph that breaks down the Seattle Seahawks passes. As you can see, Seattle likes to throw short into the outside like most other NFL teams. They had 167 attempts to the right, and 120 of those attempts were completed, creating a 68.18 completion percentage. This resulted in 918 yards and an average of 5.59 yards after the catch, which is how far the player ran with the football. They threw the ball to the short right 29.53% of the time. Different teams use sports analytics to different extents. These teams are innovating ways to stay ahead of the game and give their team as much as an advantage as they can on the field or on the ice. The Houston Astros' use of analytics have been paying off. They won the World Series last season and are on pace to make the playoffs again this year. In 2011, the Houston Astros were the worst team in baseball, with 106 losses and 56 wins, marking their first season of 100 games lost. After the terrible season, the new owner of the team blew up the team structure and started over. He hired experts to make data-driven decisions based on analytics. They used analytics to draft high-potential players such as Alex Bregman, Carlos Correa, Dallas Keuchel, and World Series MVP George Springer. They signed Jose Altuve and Yuli Gurriel via the international free agency. They signed a struggling Charlie Morton. The analytics staff of the Astros found out that he has one of the highest spin rates on his curveball. They signed him, and with some coaching, he started to use his lights-out curveball more. As you can see, this pitch moves at least 6 inches inside and drops about 4. This pitch is almost impossible to hit. These players were the core of the World Series winning team. The Astros built a team based on analytics to scout these players and won the World Series just 5 years later. They used analytics for in-game decisions to help determine where to shift players on the field and when to sub players out. Their data is so important that teams have been caught stealing from them. In 2016, CBS News reported that the scouting director from the St. Louis Cardinals had pled guilty into hacking into the player personnel database of the Houston Astros. One of the big reasons that the Astros are so good is that their scouts didn't fall for the eye test. The eye test is something that a lot of scouts and general managers fall for. Example, that really tall guy standing on second base, he's 6 foot 8 inches, 245 pounds. And the short second baseman is 5'6", 165, and he looks like he's picking his nose. If you had to pick one to play on your baseball team, who would you take? Now, to be completely honest, I would take the tall guy because I would think that he would hit the ball better and farther. Well, that tall guy, Nate Freeman, is no longer in the majors. He had a .256 batting average, 9 home runs, and 36 runs batted in over his career. The short guy is Jose Altuve. Now, if you were listening, you would have heard that last year he led the league in batting average and wins above replacement. Over Altuve's career, he's a .317 batting average, 88 home runs, and 432 runs batted in. So after hearing that, who would change their pick to the short guy? Now, I definitely would. The newest NHL team has everyone surprised by being the first in the division and making the Stanley Cup Finals in their inaugural season. Just like most fans and hockey experts, I believe that to be better in the future, the Golden Knights would have to be really bad for a while. Well, I was wrong. No one expected that they would make the playoffs with 100-plus points. They are a team built of players who former teams labeled as expendable. George McPhee, the Knights' general manager, has done a great job drafting players. Many hockey analysts are trying to figure out why they're so good. One reason they might be because they hired Tom Periska, the creator of a hockey analytics website called GeneralFanager.com, which sadly no longer exists. He is now the head of the analytics department and played a big role when drafting the players. He sorted through the data on every available player and looked for players with the most upside and speed, similar to what the Houston Astros did. He didn't look for the players with the biggest names or those who passed the hockey eye test. In the expansion draft, the Golden Knights passed up on some big names and decided to take players with better contracts and more upside, like picking William Karlsson over Josh Anderson, who is considered a better player, and selecting Eric Holla over Eric Stahl, who is a big name and passes the hockey eye test. They picked these players because of their speed, contracts, and have characteristics that fit better with the team style of play. There's arguably no greater prize in sport than the FIFA World Cup. In 2014, Germany caught a lot of people's attention by beating the host nation Brazil 7-1 in the semifinals and their use of data and analytics. The German Football Federation partnered with SAP AG, a German engineering firm, to analyzing video data in both individual and team performances. This allowed them to give feedback to their players on how to improve their performances and how to play better as a team. Using analytics, they cut down the time that they had their ball at their feet from 3.4 seconds to 1.1 second, a crucial improvement that helped the team move the ball faster. SAP also provided information on opponents' characteristics, their offensive and defensive tendencies, and their formations. Another analysis tool used by Germany is a program called Penalty Insights Function. This helped goalkeepers during penalty kicks by sorting through all the penalties that the opposing team players took and finding the patterns. It helped the goalies guess where the shot was going. It analyzed how players would shoot when losing, when winning, and in penalty shootouts. During halftime in the locker room, players accessed the data on iPads to help them prepare for the second half. If a German soccer player wanted to look up an opponent on the iPad, he'd find the player's personal data, his strengths, weaknesses, and up to 6 video clips demonstrating his abilities on the pitch. This is an example of what a German goalkeeper would see when searching up Evgen Slanov, a Ukrainian soccer player. Might help him decide that if Slanov shoots, he should dive to the bottom right, because that is where Slanov often shoots, and he has never missed the bottom right. Technology is something that is often associated with the future, and I believe that sports analytics will be no different. In the following section, I will include my personal opinions about the future of sports analytics and where the biggest opportunities will be. In basketball, hockey, football, and soccer, and baseball, there are multiple cameras that track the movements of every player on the court, field, and ice. as well as cameras to track the puck or ball. The volume of data has overwhelmed teams, and no one has yet been able to show that tracking player movements can help the win-loss ratio. I believe that this already existing technology has the ability to improve significantly. By showing if a player has made a pass to someone who is open to receive a pass, or showing if a player is putting pressure on someone, causing them to make a good play or a mistake. Plays that have been made by quality players that have been previously determined by eye. This technology could save sports teams a lot of money by replacing the scout that currently travels all over the world to see players. In the NFL, players and coaches are allowed sideline tablets. Currently, no other sport uses this technology on the sideline. I believe that if all sports allowed this technology, the game would become more strategic and technical, and the games would be a lot closer and more exciting. Coaches would have access to data that they would normally only have access to in the locker room. This would be able to make adjustments mid-game to get a better matchup and find the opponent's weaknesses. But the opponent would have the same data on the other team as well. This would make for a closer, strategic, and technical sporting event. This would make teams push for better analytics and to keep on innovating. This would also make the biggest difference in baseball because of all the different situations. If a batter is facing a new pitcher, he could access the full scouting report as well as video clips of what all of his pitches look like and what to expect in different batting counts. The pitcher would have access to the data about the batters and what pitch they like to hit and where in the strike zone they prefer. I truly believe that analytics will play into the future of sports, and teams that hop on the analytics bandwagon will benefit in the long term. In this presentation, I've detailed sports analytics from start in 1845 in baseball, when pen and paper were used to mark down runs and outs by each player. More recently, it has gained popularity when the book and movie Moneyball came out. I've learned about the history of sports analytics in both hockey, football, and baseball. Analytics has advanced so much since it first began and will continue to develop in the coming years. This project has changed my point of view on how I view an athlete, knowing that there's more than just their appearance. I would like to give a big thanks to my advisors, Laura, Stuart, and Kevin. Laura, you spent multiple hours during the weekend to correct my quality grammar, organize my crazy ideas, and make sure I never fell too far behind. Stuart, you always had lots of ideas about, everything sports related, and always kept our meetings entertaining. Kevin, you always knew about what was happening in the sports world and who was using the crazy analytics. I would also like to thank my parents. Dad, you gave me my space and were always available to help and proofread. And mostly to you, Mom, because you trusted me without knowing anything about my project. And to my lovely class for pretending to have an interest in my topic and nodding whenever I said something related to sports. Thank you.
I would like to announce that Mr. Eric Jan has met all the requirements of the Masterworks program.